Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the British Council Impact Study presentation. This presentation is the result of profound research conducted to study the impact of 5-year English for Universities project, and today we are looking for its findings. My name is Жанна Sevastyanova. I'm an English language project manager, and today I'm a Master of Ceremony. I know that many of you have made a huge effort to join us, and we are deeply appreciative. And we offer our welcome to 32 universities represented by rectors, vice-rectors and teachers, to a pool of university teachers who've become the trainers in English for Universities project, to High Institute of National Academy of Pedagogical Science of Ukraine, and our welcome to our cordial special guests, the Ministry of Education and Science with their leader. For the official opening, I would like to invite the British Council Country Director, who has always been supportive and did a lot, have done a lot to make this National Academy of Pedagogical Science of Ukraine. Please welcome Simon Williams. Our welcome to our cordial special guests, the Ministry of Education and Science.
Jana, thank you, that's very kind. Madam Minister, Deputy Minister,
Opening,
dear
I would like to
university
invite
partners, ladies
the
and
British
gentlemen,
Council Country
I
Director,
came here this morning,
who has
I
always been
and I walked through the Maidan,
and did
it
a lot,
reminded me
have done a lot
of
to
what an
make
honour
this
it is for us to be
project
celebrating this
Please
project
welcome
at this
Simon
time,
Williams.
at this time of celebration and commemoration. When 5 years ago,
Jana,
thank you, that's very kind, took its future in its own hands. Madam Minister, Deputy Minister, made a clear grasp, a clear reach, grab. I came here internationally, I walked, a fair future, a transparent future, a European future, and I don't just mean European Union, I mean European future. We at the British Council felt, what are we going to do? We knew that English and other foreign languages, English was a very important part and would be a very important part of Ukraine's expansion and reconnection and growth into that wider world. English is the language of international trade, commerce. You don't need me to tell you, you're much more expert than I am. But we knew also that if Ukraine wants to engage with the world, it needs to speak English and other languages. But also that English and other languages gives Ukrainians, and particularly young Ukrainians, access to wider sources of information to help them make their own minds up about the world. And that's very important as well. So it's a great honor for us to be here, particularly today. This project that we're celebrating is one of our flagship projects that we established after Maidan, working with our partners in the Ministry of Education, talking to key stakeholders such as yourselves, and we knew that it was an area where we could help and where there could be benefit. So we're going to hear more about the project. Jana's done some great notes for me, which of course I'm ignoring, so apologies, Jana. You're going to hear more about the project, and I won't tell you the details, but we look forward to hearing about the impact. We look very much forward to hearing from the Minister about the value that I know from our meeting yesterday she places on the project and on our continued cooperation in this field. And we very much look forward to hearing from you, our partners who have taken part in the project, what it has meant for you and how you want us to take it forward. So thank you very much for coming here today. As you know, this is probably also called the Three Simons project, because there are, amongst the British Council team, there are 3 Simons involved. I'm the least important Simon. More important is Simon Etherton, who leads our team, but we're also very honoured today to have Simon Borg, our lead expert, who's carried out the impact study. So the least important Simon will shut up now, and I will hand over to the most important Simon. Thank you very much. Jana.
Thank you very much, Simon. Just a minute. A teacher trainer, an expert, researcher, an academic research supervisor, impact and other report writer, the person who has this thrilling word before the name professor, the person who I didn't know before but traveled to 8 cities, 8 universities across Ukraine. We spent 16 days together on the train, on the plane, in marshrutkas, minibuses. And it seems that we have become friends. I'm pleased to invite the English for Universities external evaluator, our presenter today, Professor Simon Borg.
Thank you very much, Anna. Yes, we did travel a lot together, sometimes in nice weather like this, sometimes in very, very cold weather. But irrespective of the weather, the trips were very enjoyable, very productive, and I'll share some of the results of that with you today. Thank you all very much for coming. It's great to have people from the ministry here, and lots of familiar faces as well, who I met on my various travels across the country in October and November. So the purpose of my presentation today is to share with you some of the highlights from the evaluation of the project. And in a sense, all we're trying to understand at this point is what difference has this project made to ESP and to EMI in universities across the country. That is the simple question we're trying to answer today. And I can tell you straight away that the answer is a positive one. I know some people have been coming up to me this morning and saying, what's the verdict? Is it good? Is it bad? And so I can put everyone's minds at rest by saying, overall, the picture is a very positive one. As always, there will be recommendations for things we can continue working on, but there's no doubt that this has been a successful project. In terms of background, I'll do this very, very quickly so we can get to the key results. As you know, the broader context is one where there was a desire to internationalize higher education in the country, and the recognition that English plays a very central role in that process. And to kick off the project, as you know, there was a baseline study which took place over a couple of years and was published in 2017, and it focused on 2 dimensions of English in universities in the country. It focused on English for specific purposes, teaching, and it focused on English medium instruction, lecturing through the medium of English. And the baseline highlighted several areas where developments were desirable. One area was to do with the pedagogical expertise of staff. So one common recommendation that it would be beneficial both for ESP teachers and for EMI lecturers to enhance their pedagogical skills as far as teaching is concerned. There were also recommendations to do with consistency of policy and practices across and within institutions, and there were various other recommendations to do with higher level support within universities and for the ministry as well. So this is where it all started in a sense, and this, on the basis of this baseline study, the project was designed, the project started. So we had English for universities. The training, as you know, ran from 2015 to 2018, so 3 years of training. 32 higher education institutions have taken part, although for the purposes of the evaluation, we have focused on 15 universities who joined early on. And in terms of numbers of teachers who were trained, we have 331 ESP teachers across the country. My calculations, this is about 70% of the total number. And a total of 207 lecturers also attended the EMI training offered by the British Council, the academic teaching excellence course. So those are the basic numbers. In terms of objectives of the evaluation, this is what we were looking at. To what extent has the project led to reform in the design of ESP courses? To what extent has the project modernized ESP teaching? To what extent has the project improved the quality of English medium instruction? Those are three basic questions we were looking at in the evaluation. Very briefly, I'll tell you how we did the evaluation, because it's important for you to get a sense of the quantity of work that went into this. We did field work in 8 institutions across the country. You might say, why did we do 8? Well, we had 2 weeks, and I think 8 was the maximum we could squeeze in. As Jana said, we did travel quite extensively by plane, train, bus, car. We might have done something on foot as well, I can't remember. But we did travel quite a lot, and we were able to squeeze in 8. And we spent 2 days in every institution in October and November. And as you can see here, we did observations, because it was very important to go into classrooms and to see what was happening. So we did a total of 61 observations, split almost equally between ESP and EMI classes. We spoke to lots of people, or I spoke to lots of people. 62 individual interviews, again with ESP teachers, with EMI lecturers, with heads of department, and additionally another 21 group interviews, groups of teachers, groups of lecturers, groups of students. And it's important to stress that I was doing this work as an independent evaluator. So for example, when we had the interviews, British Council staff were not allowed to be part of those interviews, part of those meetings, just to make the process as objective as possible. So I was doing it as an independent evaluator. In addition to the field work, we did questionnaires with various groups of people, heads of department, of foreign language departments, ESP teachers, EMI lecturers, and ESP students. And you can see the numbers involved in those parts of the study. So overall, I think it adds up to a substantial volume of material, and that gives us confidence in the evaluation, more confidence in the evaluation, using a variety of methods, and very importantly, quite a lot of direct observation of what was going on in classrooms. It's interesting to ask people to tell you what they're doing and what they think, but it's also very important in evaluations of this kind to actually go into classrooms and to see what is actually happening. So let's move on to key results now. I'll talk about key results for ESP, key results for EMI, and then at the end, some key recommendations for ESP, key recommendations for EMI. So here's a summary really of the key result for ESP. So there is strong evidence. When we look at all the evidence we have from all the different sources, there's very strong evidence that English for universities did impact significantly on the design and delivery of ESP courses. There's no doubt that if you compare ESP teaching or ESP design and teaching before the project and now, there's a very significant and clear difference. Several areas for further development in the work of ESP teachers were also identified, and we'll comment on those. Let me just show you some of the highlights from the results. So one of the things we asked ESP teachers who attended the training, we asked them a simple question: how much effect, how would you describe the impact of the training on your work? And as you can see here, we've got over 72% of them saying the impact was very high. In other words, it led to substantial changes in their work, and 26% saying moderate, a very small number saying the impact was low. When we asked the teachers about specific changes in their work, ESP teachers, we've got over 90% of ESP teachers agreeing, for example, that my practical skills as a teacher have improved, that I use a wider range of teaching materials. There's more interaction among students in classes. This was one of the goals of the training. And also, I think it's important that a lot of teachers saying, I am more enthusiastic about my continuing professional development. I think this is one of the additional but important benefits of the project. It's created a lot of enthusiasm, excitement for further development amongst teachers. Here's a quote from a head of department. One thing people talked to me a lot about was this increased focus on students, how the project had created a lot more awareness of how important it is to focus on students, to take their needs, their interests, their futures into account. Here's just one quote from a head of department saying, now ESP teaching is much more oriented on students' future professional needs. And this fact strongly influences students' attitudes to ESP classes. So again, a lot of people saying to me, yes, we've changed what we do, and students are responding positively to these changes. Students have become more positive about their ESP classes. Here's an ESP teacher saying a similar thing. She's saying, in the training, a key message for sure was student-centered learning. This is a recurrent theme that came up in the work we did. We have to concentrate more on students and give them the opportunity to speak a lot, to express their ideas. And this is something I heard a lot from ESP teachers across the country. This increased focus on allowing students to use the language in lessons, to speak meaningfully in ways that is relevant to the students. As I said, we also asked the students for their views. Now, the students who we spoke to, and definitely the students who completed the survey, were all students who are taught by trained teachers. So the 2,200 students who completed the survey, they were all students who are taught by trained teachers. And we asked them a few questions. We asked them, you know, in your ESP lessons this year, how often do you do certain activities? How often do you work in pairs and groups? How often do you cover interesting topics, etc.? And you can see there, again, quite high percentages for these features of lessons. Things like the teacher speaks English often, you know, over 92% of the students saying that's the case. Over 86% of the students saying, yeah, we have regular opportunities to speak English. Perhaps we take these things for granted now, but we couldn't do so in the past. It wasn't a given in the past that in ESP classes, teachers would only speak English, or students would have opportunities to speak English. The content of lessons is relevant to our needs. Again, 83% of the students saying that is very often the case. So students' reports on their lessons were quite closely aligned with what teachers were saying and with what heads of department were saying. So you have this conversion of results from different perspectives, which gives us confidence that those results are reliable. We also asked the students how they feel about learning English. And again, just to give you an idea, one question was, how useful do you feel your ESP lessons are for your future? This is something that the project has focused on a lot, trying to make ESP relevant to students' future. And again, here we can see almost 80% or just under 79% of the students. Yeah, so we said on a scale of 0 to 100, how useful do you feel your lessons are? And this was the average rating, which was quite high, quite positive. How enjoyable do you find your ESP lessons? We want students to enjoy their learning. We want students to enjoy learning. And again, on a scale of 0 to 100, the average rating that students gave was 74, which is very positive. So over 2,200 students giving an average rating of 74 out of 100 is good, saying how far they enjoy their lessons. So again, students feel this change. They feel that ESP lessons are more relevant to their future and also more enjoyable, which is good too. So overall, and this also is based on my observations. When I went into classrooms to see what teachers were doing, a lot of what I saw was aligned quite closely with what teachers, heads of department, and students were saying. So I saw overall we have now a much more homogeneous approach to ESP. For example, there is a standard syllabus template which has been widely adopted and which provides a framework for the design of ESP courses for different disciplines. It's much more student-centered across the board. Teaching is a lot more interactive now, rather than being transmissive one way. There's plenty of evidence of that. ESP is much more professionally oriented. I think there's an acute awareness now of the need to make ESP relevant to students' future professions. A wider range of materials are being used, including international materials. And there's a much greater focus on speaking. So these are general changes, I think, which have been widely observed across the universities we visited. So that's all very, very positive. There were other impacts as well, which I think are important to highlight. If we start from 12 o'clock there, collaboration. ESP teachers saying the project has brought us closer together as teams, so collaboration within departments, collaboration across ESP departments, also collaboration between ESP and EMI staff. That's been a very positive result. Increased confidence, ESP teachers saying we feel more professionally competent in our work now. Changes in attitudes, ESP teachers' attitudes towards their learners, towards professional development, as we said. Status, some people even saying to me, because ESP has become a lot more professionalized, the status of ESP within universities has also improved. In other words, people within the leadership of the university are looking at ESP in a different way, looking at foreign language departments as a much more serious operation now, and that's really good. And general views about the improvements in quality. The quality of teaching has generally seen to improved, also the quality of learning. So these are some additional impacts. Okay, challenges. Of course, as I said, because I don't work for the British Council, it's not my job just to say nice things about projects. This project has been immensely successful, but of course I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't highlight areas where further work can be done. One challenge that a lot of people mentioned to me is this, and which I also noted in my work, is a variable time allocation for English classes. It does still vary quite a lot within and across universities, I say. So the standard seems to be that in their first year, students will get 90 minutes of English a week. That seems to be fairly consistent. But beyond that, it does vary enormously. And very often it depends on what academic departments are willing to give the foreign language department. So in some universities, students will do 90 minutes of English once a week in their first year, and that will be all the English they get for 4 years. In other universities, they will get English every year. In other universities, they'll get English in the first year, nothing in the second year. They'll get it in the third year, maybe. So there's all the permutations we can think about exist. Okay, so there's this variable time allocation. And as I said, the 90 minutes a week in year one, if that's all we're getting, it's a very limited allocation of time if we are serious about boosting students' levels of English. Okay, so I think that's something we need to think more about. Assessment. The assessment of ESP was not a major focus of the project. There was some reference to assessment in some of the training, but reforming assessment was not a major objective. And although there seem to have been changes in assessment, for example, peer assessment, formative assessment, self-assessment have been introduced by some departments, this is clearly an area where heads of department and teachers have said we need more support to develop our assessment system. So I think that's one clear area for further work. Low entry levels of English amongst university students is also an issue that merits further consideration. There are hugely varying levels of English amongst first-year students. Some come to university with reasonably good levels of English. They might already be at B1. Others might be A1 or lower. This creates challenges for ESP classes, particularly when they're teaching these students in mixed ability groups, okay? Which is my next and related point. So this is a challenge. This is something that impacts significantly on the work of foreign language departments, and it's something that merits further attention. How can we best respond to this reality that students join universities with very low levels of English very often, yet we want them to go straight into ESP classes in mixed ability groups? So I think that's something we need to think more about. The other thing is to do with general pedagogical skill beneficial. So that's all I'll say about ESP. Overall, substantial impact on what's happening in foreign language departments, substantial impact on what teachers and learners are doing in classrooms, extremely positive results there. But we've got a few issues here to keep in mind as we move forward. Let's move on to EMI now. Okay, here's the summary for EMI. So EMI lecturers, those who attended the training, were very positive about the quality of the EFU training, unanimously positive about the training. Observations of EMI lectures highlighted variable EMI practices, so in some cases very good, in some cases less good, and there is clear scope for further development in the work of EMI lecturers and in how universities support them. Okay, so let me just elaborate on some of these. So positive reactions to the training. These are lecturers' words, not mine. I mean, there's no harm in getting carried away sometimes, okay, by calling something a miracle. But this is how some lecturers describe the impact of the training on them to me. A miracle, unbelievable, really useful, great. So people are very, very positive. They valued the training enormously, the academic teaching English course a lot, and felt it was extremely beneficial for them. We asked them specific questions about the impact of the training. For example, one of the statements in the questionnaire was, "I can deliver lectures in English more effectively," which is one of our key goals. And you've got over 98% of the EMI lecturers completing the survey saying, yes, that's definitely the case for me. Another one was, "I feel more confident lecturing in English." Boosting confidence was another important goal. And again, we can see over 93% in this case saying that they agree with that. And these are just snapshots to illustrate the very positive reactions we had from EMI lecturers to the training. Now again, as we said, we went around the universities. I had the opportunity to observe many EMI classes in a wide range of disciplines. And as I say, there was a lot of good practice on display. And when I say good practice in EMI, what I mean is lecturers speaking English well. Well means, you know, they're easy to understand, they're reasonably accurate, they're quite fluent, quite confident. Then there's things to do with the structures of lectures themselves. So lectures having a preview and a review, students completing tasks, and very often completing tasks in English during lectures, of course. Lectures that were clearly structured, clearly organized. Lectures where students were asked questions and given opportunities to contribute and to participate. Where lecturers checked students' understanding regularly during lectures. Okay, these are all elements that were focused on in the academic teaching excellence course. There was slides and realia being used effective to support learning as well. So there was plenty of evidence in the EMI lectures I saw of these features. And these were features that were emphasized in the academic teaching English training. So clear transfer there from the training into lecture rooms, very clear. As I said, the quality of the EMI lectures I saw varied. So I saw a lot of this. I also saw lectures where there was less evidence of this. Okay, so we shouldn't get carried away and say, yeah, 100% every EMI lecture is doing all of this, but there is substantial evidence that this is happening, but also evidence that, of course, more support is needed. Again, broader impacts of the EMI strand of the project. And again, if we start from 12 o'clock there, we've got EMI lecturers talking very positively about the way in which the training has created networks of lecturers who are interested in EMI. And lecturers spoke very warmly about this. I've made now friendships, networks with lecturers in other universities, people I met on the training. We still keep in touch. We share ideas. We can ask each other questions. Creating those kinds of networks is very important. Increased confidence is something that I've mentioned already. Lecturers saying, yes, we feel a lot more confident now going into a lecture and speaking English. Before we were a bit uncertain, but now we think we've got the tools to do a good job. Changes in lecturers' attitudes generally towards lecturing. For example, the realization that it's important to pay attention to students doing lectures. It's important to pay attention to students, to whether they are actually following, to whether they're benefiting. Maybe in the past we would just go in, deliver the lecture, walk out without thinking much about what the student experience was. There's a lot more awareness now of the student experience during lectures. People saying, yes, the skills we've learned as part of the training, we are applying those to our lectures in Ukrainian as well. So it's not, although the focus is on English here, but the skills for effective lecturing promoted during the training are being applied more widely by the lecturers in their work. And of course, lecturers talk to me quite a lot about the value to them of improved English. It allows them to participate more fully in international academic activity. So academic projects, academic exchanges, very often the working language for these is English. So by developing their English, by feeling more confident in their English, lecturers regularly said to me, we feel better equipped to take part in these kinds of activities. Here's one quote. Here's one quote from an EMI lecturer, again, just to illustrate some of the points I've made, saying, it changed me as a teacher. It changed me as a teacher, it changed my whole mentality. I understand it's very important to collaborate with students during all classes. So the view that the lecture is a collaborative activity, for example, that's quite an important change in the way teaching is conceptualized. The lecture is a collaborative activity between the lecturer and students. That's quite an important change that a lot of people mentioned to me. Okay, as with ESP, of course, we do have some challenges that came up for EMI, which I'll highlight. One is, I think, simply put, as the lack of central coordination for EMI within universities. So within the same university, different departments are approaching EMI in different ways. Some are doing more, some are doing less, some are doing none. Some are doing it this way, some are doing it that way. Some think these are the requirements, others think those are the requirements. So this is within the same department, there's still quite a lot, within the same institution, sorry, there's still quite a lot of variety. Of course, this also applies to across institutions. And one of my recommendations a bit later addresses the need for more central coordination of EMI within universities. As I said, there's variable institutional practices. Now, variable institutional practices in themselves are not a problem. because universities should have a little bit of autonomy, and that means that they may vary slightly in what they do. But I think we need institutional variation within some kind of broader framework that ensures a certain amount of consistency. There's variable levels of support within institutions for EMI. And very often the level of support does seem to depend on the availability of a key head of department who's particularly keen on EMI. So where this leading person exists within a department, EMI is being promoted. Where that champion of EMI doesn't exist, there's less activity. But it does still seem to depend a lot on individual initiatives. When I asked lecturers about some of the challenges they face in doing EMI, time was something they mentioned a lot to me. They said it does take longer to prepare courses and lectures in English. It's not simply about translating your notes from Ukrainian into English. You need to start from scratch. So how can we provide some support for this, for some recognition for this additional time? And also resources. Lecturer was saying, yeah, it would be useful for us if we had, for example, access to international textbooks in English, which we could draw on in designing our lectures. So how can we support lecturers in addressing these needs? Another key challenge for EMI, I think, is students' levels of English. Students' levels of English. If we want lecturers to teach in English, students need to be able to cope with that linguistically. Students need to have a level of English that allows them to follow lectures and to participate in lectures. And very often that's not the case. Very often that's not the case. So we do have issues here of what level of English should students be expected to have before we can invite them to engage in EMI. If we have students sitting in lectures, listening to lectures in English, but not understanding, not being able to participate, that raises questions about the value of the activity. And here we have a lecturer who was making this point to me, saying the main issue is that not everybody of our students has sufficient English. She was talking about the challenges she faces when she delivers lectures in English. The level of English is very different. Most of them have elementary level. Yeah, so I think this is an important issue for us to think about. There were cases, for example, where lecturers said to me, we do teach in English sometimes, but then the following week we will do the same lecture again in Ukrainian, just to make sure that they understand. And that doesn't seem to be a very efficient use of time or effort. So this just highlights some of the challenges that exist at the moment. I did also see a couple of EMI lectures which I think were organized especially for me. Maybe there weren't any regular courses at the time, and it was clear, if I'm going to be frank, that the students had very little idea about what was going on. The impression was, let's fill a room with students. The lecturer did a competent job, but clearly the level of English amongst the students wasn't good enough for them to engage. Okay? And if that's the case, that raises questions about the value of the activity itself. Okay? All right, let's move on to some recommendations now, just to round up. I think in the report there are, 15, 20 recommendations. I've tried to collapse these into 4 or 5 for each area. So for ESP, one important starting point is the need to sustain momentum. The project has created a lot of very positive momentum over the course of 3 years. Momentum, enthusiasm, commitment, willingness to change. The levels are up here at the moment. How do we keep them up there? It would be unfortunate if 6 months passed, for example, and there was no further activity or support, because then inevitably levels of energy start to drop. So how do we keep the momentum that's been created going? And I'm not suggesting that that momentum has to be supported completely externally. I don't think that's realistic. A lot of the momentum now will need to be supported internally. And so we need to think about what can departments do, what can foreign language departments do to create effective in-house mechanisms for continuing professional development. We've had the training, that's established a very good basis, but how do we continue now? How do we continue creating opportunities for teachers to develop internally? And there are various models of professional development that we can look at, and it may be that some external support is provided for these, but ultimately, the time now is for departments to start thinking about how they can take professional development further internally in order to sustain momentum. Assessment is something I've noted already. In terms of topics to focus on as we move forward, I think assessment is a key area. Progress has been achieved. There has been some reform in the way ESP is assessed, but we haven't really been able to evaluate quite closely yet the quality of those changes. So I think that would be an important focus moving forward as well. Coordination is an interesting thing. We have at least two models within universities at the moment when it comes to ESP. We've got some universities where there is one foreign languages department that is responsible for ESP across the university. That kind of model tends to work well because there's greater consistency across the institution. But we still have many universities where ESP is handled by several foreign language departments within the same university. This creates additional challenges because it's more difficult for them to coordinate their activities. I'm not saying it's not possible to work with different departments. We probably can't change that. But the issue for us to think about is how can we improve coordination within universities where there are several foreign language departments operating. Okay? And my last recommendation to do with ESP is to do with thinking about how we can align policy and goals. And this may require us to clarify the goals. For example, when students graduate from your universities, is there a target that you're aiming for in terms of levels of English? Is there an outcome that we're aiming for at the moment? At the moment, I'm not aware that there is. No one said to me, we expect graduates to be at B1, we expect graduates to be at A2. I haven't heard that from anyone, and it seems to me there isn't a target there. Now, the absence of a target has implications for the way universities work. Okay? So at the moment we have students coming in with varying levels of English. They receive varying levels of English during their studies, and they graduate with enormously varying levels of English as well. Is there any way in which we can look at that, establish some goals, and use those to maybe approach ESP a bit more consistently? Okay, a few recommendations for EMI as well. I think there's still a lot of ambiguity across institutions about policies and standards. For example, in some universities, I asked staff, if you want to teach courses in English, what are the prerequisites for lecturers? And I got different answers. Sometimes I got different answers from different departments in the same university. So some departments say to me, yes, a lecturer must have a B2 certificate in English to teach courses in English. This is what some universities said. In other universities, they suggested that wasn't the case. That wasn't a requirement. In some universities, they said, if we teach courses in English, we must also teach them in Ukrainian, the same course. In other universities, they said, no, that wasn't the case. So I think there's some work that can be done just to clarify what the requirements are at a national level, and where universities have some flexibility to make their own decisions. One way of doing this, I think, is to create EMI coordinators within institutions. This is a very simple step, but one that I think would make a big difference. At the moment, universities don't seem to have a central point of reference when it comes to EMI. There's no one authority within the university who people from different departments can turn to for advice. And one result of this is that there are varying interpretations of what's possible, what's acceptable, and what the regulations are. But if we had these coordinators, in the same way that we have the heads of department for foreign language departments, they play a very important role. If we have an equivalent to them for EMI, I think it would be very, very useful. It's important also to remember, as a third recommendation, that if we want the quality of EMI to improve, we need to enhance lecturers' English and in italics there, I think, yes, their pedagogical skills. It's not enough just to enhance English and to assume that all lecturers with good English can teach effectively in English. In fact, most of my recommendations for EMI lecturers are not to do with language. Their language is okay. Most of my recommendations, I think they're in box 5 on your handout, are to do with instructional issues. So it's very important to remember that in improving EMI, it's language and pedagogical skills, not just language. So having the B2 certificate in itself does not guarantee effective EMI practice. A fourth recommendation, this is my second last recommendation, is to do with support for EMI. As I said, lecturers told me about some of the challenges they face in designing and delivering courses in English. They say it takes more time, we haven't got the resources in English. Some lecturers saying it's quite bureaucratic, there's an endless amount of paperwork to do, and that is a deterrent. So what can institutions do to provide more support? Because that would certainly encourage more lecturers to engage in EMI. And what can institutions do to incentivize EMI? I asked lecturers, are there any incentives for you for teaching in English? And again, I got different results. Some people said, yes, we get a salary increment for teaching in English. Yes, we get a salary increment if we have a certificate of English language. Others said, we don't. Sometimes within the same institution, but different departments. Lecturers saying we do, we don't. So again, how can we incentivize EMI in a way that will be optimally productive? And my last recommendation for EMI is to do with quality assurance. I know quality assurance is something universities in the country are currently working on, and I believe there's been some support from the British Council for that. What can we do to develop quality assurance mechanisms that relate specifically to EMI? And this would require some definition of standards, some definition of criteria, and some tools and processes that can be used to assess the quality of EMI across universities in a relatively consistent way. So those are five recommendations that I'm highlighting for EMI. So just to conclude then, as I said at the beginning, I think the overall picture is undoubtedly positive. I work on different projects of this kind in different parts of the world, and I'm in a reasonably good position to compare the impact of this project with others I've seen. And I have no doubt in saying that this project has had a very positive impact. If we compare ESP 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and ESP now, how departments work, how courses are designed, how courses are taught, and the student experience is very different in a positive way. If we look at EMI 3 years ago and now, also we'll see that there's more EMI, lecturers are better equipped to work, to teach in English and feel more confident doing so. So overall, the results are positive. As always, with an initiative of this scale and complexity, there'll be issues that require further development, and we've highlighted those as well. But I don't think there's anything that we should be particularly concerned about there. So overall, very positive. And I think in concluding, what I should say is congratulations to everyone who's been a part of the work, because you've done an extremely good job. And thank you to everyone who supported me while I was traveling around the country collecting data for this evaluation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you. We will have time for questions. And now let us move on to the stakeholders' responses. You know that we have selected a sample of stakeholders, and they received the report in advance. It was a secret. And the first, I would like to invite our special guest, the Minister of the Ministry of Education and Science, Lilia Mihailovna Grinevich.
So, dear British Council team, our respectful university representatives, dear colleagues, thank you for the exhaustive presentation on the English of University's project results. Especially, I would like to express my gratitude to Simon Williams, to Simon Atherton. Where is Simon? Oh, hi. And the project consultant, Simon Borg. Thank you, colleagues, for your dedicated work on the report. I want to believe that every university in our country understands the crucial role of English in the teaching and learning and research process in higher education. Benefits of having subject in English are obvious. You can easily attract more talented students, both Ukrainian and foreign. I want to mention that we have around 75,000 foreign students in the country. This number grows also thanks to the growing share of English taught programs. We can attract more foreign students if the higher education institutions keep developing and upgrading their English programs. As we have all witnessed, the report presents substantial qualitative and quantitative data collected and analyzed. In fact, today we have heard every reason and good grounds to believe that the English for Universities project has had a significant impact on the teaching English for specific purpose and using English as a medium of instruction in Ukrainian universities. About English for specific purposes, first of all, it is clear that the project has created a strong ESP community, which is ready for change. It's amazing to see how common are the majority of your responses about the impact of the project on your lessons. Lessons became more practical and student-centered, teaching methods got more interactive, students reported to be more motivated to learn English and understood better its value for the future. There are very important challenges outlined in the report. These are key challenges that we have to solve together. By these, I mean the limited number of hours allocated to ESP courses, low entry levels of English among students, professional development of ESP teachers and new approaches to assessment. Many of the solutions depend on the universities themselves. The autonomy of the universities can help to tackle these challenges. Some of the problems, however, shall be addressed on the national level by the ministry. And we are ready to act together with you. Regarding English medium instruction, of course, we are deeply convinced that English language proficiency should go together with the teaching skills. It should not be assumed that every lecturer who has passed an official English test is able to deliver effective EMI courses. We are also aware that there is a kind of uncertainty regarding Article 48 of our law on higher education among university faculties and administrative staff. This is the article about the language of education. And the baseline report of 2017, the recent one, mentions this article as problematic. We believe this problem has to be fixed in the amended law on higher education. Now we propose draft of such amendments. Meanwhile, the ministry sees a real need for producing a document that would address questions regarding EMI. The document will include, for example, a lecture prerequisites, incentives available, procedures for setting up a course, which is on the compulsory subject list for external independent tests to enter higher education institution. This stimulates studying English, and we already see a growing tendency to pass the English test. Secondly, an obligatory foreign language entry test was introduced to enroll for the master degree programs. We have also considered accepting international English proficiency certificates as a substitute for the external independent assessment of English. However, we understand that much is still to be done to improve the level of English proficiency in the basic and senior school. The reform of the new Ukrainian school shall tackle this issue as well. To roll up, I would like to mention what has already been done to establish consistency in teaching and learning English at university. The ministry introduced procedures that encourage university to increase the number of courses taught in foreign language. The ministry has also specified the general foreign language competence level in the national higher education standards and also in licensing of programs for foreign students. I want to wrap up my short intervention with a call to action. This English for University project of the British Council on this stage is over. It ends with a huge amount of data, materials, and recommendations. Having this, I believe it is a high time to prepare a systemic policy on improving English in our universities. The ministry is ready to develop such a policy proposal and present it to the government for approval. I want to invite you all the participating universities, to join a working group on the development of this policy. I believe it is the right thing to do in order to make the results of the project sustainable, and we count on our very good partner, British Council. Thank you indeed for your support and hope for the further cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's really appreciated, and this is the the words we've heard. Really appreciate it in terms of the English for Universities project and our recommendations and what we, as the organization working in environment, in educational environment, will think and work in. Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite the response from Poltava National Technical Yuri Kondratyuk University. Vice Rector Svetlana Sivitskaya.
Dear colleagues, first of all, I want to say thank you for British Council, because we are working together during these 5 years, and we have these challenges about which Simon mentioned, and we try to receive this great result, and we really receive it. And I want to highlight the main results that in all institutes and faculties in our university now we offer and deliver courses in English. So it's a really great result for us, and we deliver it as for international students, as for our students from Ukraine. As a result of these projects, 30% of our teacher staff now have the English level in B2 and higher, and it's approved by testing from British Council Aptis. And the other result, it's we have internship programs for our teachers together with British universities. And we're proud that we have only one Ukraine-British double degree program in our university together with the University of Greenwich. And in framework of this program, we have internship courses for our teachers, which increase the level of English for our EMI teachers in 3 specialties. So for our university, it's really great result because we improve our higher education quality assurance in the framework of this project. And the second, it's also cooperation with other companies all over the world, and we can say that our teachers now have internships. For example, in such company as Schlumberger company, it's one of the best 3D modeling company in the world, and our teachers receive these certificates and they know these programs. And as a result of this project, we can say that our teachers now increase their level of pedagogical skills and English level. So we can say with no doubt these projects are very resultable and really great. And we have great impact in our university for our students and for our staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I was just to say the minister unfortunately has to leave us now, but really on behalf of the British Council, and I know on behalf of all of you, we'd like to thank her for taking the time to come today, and also for briefing us on those really important, really exciting ways forward that I know we will all want to be involved in the future. So Minister, thank you very much for coming. Your support is really important.
We are moving on, and I would like to invite to the stage the Vice Rector of Vasil Stus Donetsk National University, displaced in Vinnytsia, Tatiana Orehova.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear Zhanna. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Good afternoon, dear participants, managers of English for Universities project, and good afternoon, dear guests. It's a great honor for me to be here and to speak out on behalf of our university. And first of all, I would like to express many thanks to dear Professor Simon Borg for his such profound and such impressive report about impact of English for Universities project on EMI and ESP staff and community of our universities. Thank you very much. And I would like to say several words about our university. And first of all, our university joined its project in September of 2015. Going through challenging and difficult times of our displacement. After our displacement, we had no any technical facilities, and we had no and we have lack of financial resources for further development. And so what we had, it was devoted to our student staff, our teaching staff, which were stayed positive and help our university to navigate these difficult times. I would like, among several points which I would like to comment, is several words concerning EMI community and how it has changed during our jointing of project. I must admit that there are mainly academic teaching excellence training organized by British Council Ukraine for our lecturers from non-linguistic facilities during 2015-2017 that activated our EMI community and raised their awareness about crucial role of English languages for modern educational process. Our EMI lecturers claim that after participation in this training, their classes have become more interactive and relevant to their students-oriented approaches than it used before. On this slide, you can see that the needs to deliver classes in English stimulated our EMI lecturers to improve their knowledge in general English and in English of academic purposes. During 2015-2018, 45 EMI lecturers attended the classes of general courses, which we organized under the support of Renaissance Fund. And during 2016 and 2018, we conducted several training for preparing to aptitude test, and as a result, currently 41 EMI lecturers now have gotten the aptitude test certificate B2 C1 level of proficiency English. Moreover, as for now, our EMI lecturers, second slide please, have devoted 113 bachelor and master degree program courses in English. On this slide, you can see the dynamics of this indicator, and we are not going to stop. I cannot but mention that during this period of project, we have managed active cooperation with other universities, European universities, and implementation double diploma, 5 double diploma degrees with our partner from Bulgaria, from Lithuania, in terms of master degree, bachelor's degree program in the field of biology, environmental management, in financial management, international financial management, and etc. I would like to say, I am now a strong believer that despite all our challenges, we will do our best to raise our lecturers' motivation for further English courses delivering and for further English courses development, and by means of increasing financial incentive, reducing the bureaucracy process, and of course increasing the number of international students and more active involvement our EMI lecturers into academic mobility programs. At the end of my commentary, let me express our deepest gratitude to country director of British Council Ukraine, Simon Williams, to our dear managers of project, Zhana Sivasyanova and Nadia Udova, and of course to Professor Simon Borg, for their help, for their very useful recommendation, and for their overall support during these 3 years. We are looking forward for further cooperation with British Council Ukraine, for continuing our professional development, for our EMI staff, for our ESP staff, and for all representatives of our universities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. That's a good response in English. I would like to invite to the stage the Vice Rector of National Technical University Dnipro Polytechnic, Mykola Tregub. Mykola has been an active EMI teacher in our project, by the way.
Thanks a lot, thanks a lot. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I would like to say a few words about our cooperation and about our project at the National Mining University in 2015. We have started as National Mining University, and we had a long period of transformation with British Council project, and now we are National Technical University Dnipro Polytechnic, and it's great influence and great opportunity for us to share our experience and to share our positive thinking with British Council. First of all, I'd like to point some key facts that we had since 2015. We have started the project at 2015, and we were the 8th higher education institution that participated in this project, the last one on the short list. So it was very challenging for us, and the task was very difficult for us, but what we had before 2015? Before 2015, we had a great department of foreign languages, who helped a lot. The teachers of foreign languages department have helped a lot for us. And we had several courses taught in English. And we had a lot of enthusiastic teachers. And after that, we participated in British Council project and EMI project. We had 18 lecturers who were involved in trainings. And after that, they became real agents of transformations at the universities. So now we have a good team of lecturers who know English, not only know English, but they can share their knowledge, they can share their experience with students, and they're also very grateful to British Council. I can say from both sides, from an administrative and from teaching one, that British Council helped a lot. And we have discussed many times about our possibilities to teach before 2015 and now. And only that fact that during 2 years, we have 120 foreign students that are taught only in English. Before 2016, we had 0. Now 120, and still we're in the process. We have all our 40 study programs that are taught in English. Not small courses, but all programs could be taught in English. So I think that all of these facts, they can summarize that British Council project, the English for universities, they are very helpful. And we are also very grateful, all the university team are very grateful for cooperation with British Council, but at the same time it's a little bit sad that this project is ending now, but we still believe that ending this project is just the beginning of another one. So let me say thanks to all of us. Let me say thanks to representatives from British Council, especially Simon Williams, especially Simon Borg, who was participating at our institutions, and we have discussed a lot about these things. Thanks to Zhana Sevastianova, who helped us a lot, and we're looking forward to new project British Council. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say that when some opportunities are caught, so there are new opportunities and new doors are open. Now the response from our, we can call her change agent, very active head of foreign languages department, the director of language center in Chernihiv National University of Technology, Svetlana Litvin.
Thank you, Zhanna. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to share our experience. We've been within this project for more than 2 years and really have some very positive outcomes. I want to focus your attention on the issue of collaborating between ESP teachers and EMI teachers. Because first of all, we had experience of having a network of our dissemination events just among ESP teachers, and EMI teachers had their own network of dissemination events. But from now on, we have a community of ESP and EMI teachers. And this is very positive and very beneficial result. So I'd like to speak about some outcomes which we have from this collaboration. So first of all, as a result, now we have on a regular basis consultations with teachers from the departments responsible for professional training of our students. We can have these consultations before designing syllabi, and also when we have some challenging things to speak about. So this is now not a problem. We discuss the things and we have very positive and good results. Next one, ESP teachers collaborate with teachers of professional disciplines in order to facilitate students to take part in different conferences with different statuses, like All Ukrainian, as well as international scientific and practical conferences for young scientists. One more thing, we have very interesting experience at our department. Before defending master's works, our students of many specialisms introduced their works, first of all, at our ESP classes, at the presence of their supervisors from professional departments, and after that they choose to defend their works in English or in Ukrainian. Teachers of our university improve their language skills at the course provided by ESP teachers. On average, after 2 terms of training, most of them are aware of EPTIS specifications and are prepared to EPTIS exam, which is conducted at our university at regular basis once or twice a year. More than 60 teachers were enrolled in the course, and about 40 passed this test with B2 level and higher. It's also worth mentioning that our university authorities motivate EMI teachers to improve their language skills by giving a rise in wages depending on the level of English confirmed by EPTIS certificate. We also have English for Presentation course, which is normally conducted for EMI teachers, and help EMI teachers to focus attention on creating and giving presentations, provided new experience, and inspire them to use English in their presentations wider. More than 20 courses are delivered in English now by EMI teachers, but mostly for Ukrainian students. Teachers of our department, participants of the project, have started 3 new disciplines for students of the Faculty of Electronic and Information Technology. So they passed over these disciplines to our department. These courses are Communications Management for Cooperation in IT Engineering, Group Dynamics in Communications, and Business Communication. And we also have one more course, which was passed by Faculty of Finance and Economics to our department, and this is Academic English. One more very positive outcome, that this year teachers of our department, those who are participants of the project, have been invited to deliver the course Business English for International Ukraine-Norway project, which is focused on retraining the military people who took part in anti-terroristic operations and the members of their families. Our plans are to continue our dissemination work, not only among the teachers of our university, but also to attract, to invite teachers from other higher educational institutions of our city, to involve colleagues from maybe not only from our city. And we, of course, want to say thank you for British Council team for organizing very resultive events for us, for the opportunities they gave us to develop our skills, to share, and also to say thank you to all our colleagues who gave us opportunity to share our experience with them, and also for unforgettable moments we had together in preparing kapustniks and some other events. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. Thank you for your contribution. Another change agent in our project, you know that heads of foreign languages departments, they were mostly the coordinators of the project in the universities. And this is another head of foreign languages department for humanities, Irina Simkova, from Kyiv National Technical University of Ukraine, Igor Sikorsky Kyiv Polytechnic Institute.
Thank you, Zhana. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I am glad to be here on behalf of my university. And one thing which I would like to comment today is, I think it's the most promising results of English for University project. It's a syllabus. Includes 4 modules designed by representatives from different universities. Due to the lack of time, I am not going to tell about it in detail, yes, and I didn't make presentation, but there are 2 aspects which I would intend to highlight. So within the project, representatives from different universities designed 4 modules. A template which is adopted for ESP course for any specialty. As far as we can see, it was really very effective. Due to the feedback provided by our teachers, provided by our students, the usage of this syllabus gives us new opportunities. It led to more positive and substantial changes in ESP teaching. And we saw it from Simon Borg report. But one more thing which we monitor is that it was easy for teachers who participated in British Council training, who passed British Council training or visited dissemination events organized by trained teachers. So in our university, we are going to continue to implement this design syllabus and organize dissemination events. But as far as I know, this syllabus is not adopted by all universities around Ukraine. That is why I think that to impart our experience, it will be nice, it will be good idea, and it will be useful to develop recommendations which can be used by universities where this syllabus has not been adopted till now. And these recommendations may be designed in a form of a simple tool which can be used by any ESP teacher when designing module for different specialism, for specialism which they exactly need. For this purpose, I think we may propose to create a focus group. This focus group may consist of representatives from the project, from different universities. It may be also created maybe on the basis of Ministry of Education and Science, or with the help of, with its support maybe. And I believe that the development and expansion of these recommendations will help teachers from different universities to adopt new syllabus. It provides more effective ESP training, and as a result, we could have more competitive specialists all around Ukraine, not only in the universities, these 23 universities which participated in the project. And of course, one more time, as a result, it could increase the employability of our graduates. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Irina. That's interesting about syllabus. Now I would like to invite a fantastic English teacher from Cherkasy State Technological University, Lyudmila Usik.
Yes. Thank you everybody. No, I need recommendation number 5 here. Well, it is certainly a great honor and great pleasure for me to speak on behalf of the ESP teachers, on behalf of all those who try to do their best to become better every day, who are constantly seeking for opportunities to grow as professionals. And special thanks for the box 4, which includes areas for further development in ESP lessons, which is something we can start working with directly. We can just start correcting directly. And of course, the most important and significant part of the report for us were the recommendations. We wholeheartedly agreed with all of them, as all of them addressed directly and immediately all our urgent professional needs. But I can only highlight 1 or 2 of them, as my time is limited. And the most burning, the most urgent topic for us is our professional development, of course. As the author indicates, ESP teachers want to become more expert practitioners rather than academics, and that is true. That is true. However, for the time being, the requirements for the teachers of foreign languages departments, for ESP teachers, and for the lecturers of theoretical disciplines in which their students major are the same, and they are mostly focused on the academic, and maybe the most prominent component of those requirements is the academic component. Everyone knows, I just want to talk a lot about it, that these requirements may be absolutely justified in case of teaching discipline in which your students major, because the lecturer should keep abreast of the latest developments in his or her field, and what is more important, to share this information with his or her students. This is not the case, though, when you teach a foreign language to your students. Our students are not interested in the theoretical peculiarities of the language. They are interested in practical skills and our ability to provide, to ensure their success in mastering the main language skills. I will just, what do we have here? A teacher, an ESP teacher, wants to develop his teaching skills, his methodology, but he's made to continue his academic research. He tries to succeed in both spheres, but the usual result is that both spheres suffer, and the ESP teacher suffers as well. And so, therefore, I strongly believe that both our students and our teachers will benefit from devising a special system of requirements for the teachers of foreign languages departments that would focus on modernizing their ESP teaching or any other language teaching methodology. And probably it could include visiting more training courses, conferences, events that are dedicated to teaching and learning English or other foreign language. And if publications do appear, they should be about something that could be directly implemented in the classroom. And just let me know, do I have time for one more point? Yes, and one more point that is closely connected with the previous one is the issue of certification. Most of us have visited the trainings provided with the British Council within the framework of the English for Universities project. And everyone, I think, was impressed by excellent organization, up-to-date information, expert trainers, hours of hard work in class, and hours of hard follow-up work. I think if it could only be possible for the authorized bodies to select several, not only the British Council, to select several international or foreign organizations and add them on the list of institutions who can provide official teacher training courses, and for example, whose certificates would be valid and acknowledged all over the Ukraine, because at the moment the status of our certificates is unclear. Whose certificates would be acknowledged all over Ukraine and could even be regarded as підвищення кваліфікації. I'm using the Ukrainian term here to avoid confusion. So that would be great, I think. And I'm nearing now the end of my talk, and let me thank once again the organizers of this wonderful event. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much for your constructive points. One more feedback from EMI teacher who uses English to teach subject. Mikhailo Fris, Associate Professor, Computer Science Department, Ternopil Ivan Puluy National Technical University.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm really very glad to be here with you today. I'm Associate Professor of Computer Science Department of Ternopil National Technical University. And first of all, I'd like to thank you, British Council, for giving us the brilliant chance to be trained as a course for EMI lectures. It was very useful, and I got a lot of useful experience and a lot of different innovative ideas. I try to apply that ideas in my courses as EMI teachers. As an EMI teacher, to create the interactive learning environment and to develop the critical thinking of my students. I also implement the student-centered approach to my classes, which includes organizing the discussions, working in small groups, asking open-ended questions. Also, I frequently use the method I call teach others or teach your friend. For example, if you have the student which is good student, and I ask him to explain the material for another students which don't understand something, for example. And it is very effective for both of them and also for me as a teacher as well. And sometimes I try students to give me written feedback, and now I just want to present you some phrases from the feedback of my students from Africa. After the first class, when I was trying to organize it in the form of discussion in small group. So what students wrote after that, I like the class because it gives us the opportunity to share our views. Learning in group helps us to develop a spirit of teamwork even we are out there into the real world. Working together as a team makes learning faster and easier. It is better than when the teacher delivers a lecture without checking understanding. It is easy to learn like that, and I am more confident working in team when teacher just help us. So this is from feedback from the students. Also, I'd like to say that we all, the EMI teachers, disseminate that ideas we learned from the British Council in our university. First of all, we organized the big workshop named Creating Interactive Learning Environment in cooperation with ESP teachers. Also I disseminate that knowledge among the Ukrainian students. I use it in my lectures for Ukrainian students, and very often I also explain them why it is important to discuss, why it is important to ask and answer the questions. I also disseminate the ideas among the Ukrainian students. Thank you again. Thank you, British Council, and I hope it is not the last project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's always interesting to know, to get the feedback from subject teachers. I would like to say that Institute of Higher Education of National Academy of Science of Ukraine has always been our partner and supportive in what we are doing in educational area. And now for the response, I'm inviting Olena Orzhil, the Head of Policy in Higher Education Department.
Thank you very much. We as the Institute of Higher Education were not the participants of this project, but we enjoy the yields, the fruit of this English teaching project, and we are really very grateful for this. So whenever we are having excellent English speakers during our seminars, we know that this is thanks to the British Council. I was asked to speak about the report, the impact report, and I would like to say thank you and congratulations to Professor Borg. This report is really interesting to read, and it contains excellent recommendations. I also would like to congratulate the British Council for this very ambitious, wide-scope project, very brave, to involve 32 universities and to have and to embrace the whole of the country. And also I would like to congratulate Ukrainian universities that you were so brave and ambitious to take part in this project. We understand that you all have a significant workload, but nevertheless you took on this extra responsibility and you did well, as I learned from the report. Our trainers in other British Council project, University Leadership Program, taught us at this point to ask ourselves, when the project is over, to ask ourselves questions. So what now, and what next? And in answering these questions, I would say, read the report, learn recommendations by heart, and go ahead. Professor Borg mentioned it as one of the first recommendations: sustain the momentum, do not stop, continue. Each participating university was asked to develop an action plan for this project, and I would encourage you to go on to make an action plan for the next year and the next year and the next year. Make every year a new step, make a new challenge, challenge yourself, challenge your managers, university leaders, challenge your students, don't stop. Also, I would like to say excel. Enjoy in what you're doing, think what you do very well, share it with your colleagues within the university, share it with your colleagues with other universities, organize a workshop, it does not require much time, write an article, have a conference, each university has an annual conference, speak about your excellence and spread these ideas, do not stop. And of course there is a question, how? I know two words, one word, engage, and the synonym to it, involve. By the way, I do not know the difference between engage and involve, and if somebody will explain what it is, what is the difference, I would be very grateful. So engage your students, your colleagues, the Ministry of Education, university rectors, vice rectors, collaborate as you have been doing already, as you know how to do it. Use the networks, use the platforms. So engage yourself and enjoy your colleagues. My other recommendation would be link English teaching with other initiatives in your university and in higher education of Ukraine. Quote or refer to Bologna process, mention priorities of Bologna process, priorities of higher education reform. Make this link between English teaching and what you would like to do with English, with what our government and what European higher education area want to change, and I think it will work. Refer to EU-Ukraine Association Agreement, refer to internationalization, strategic planning, and other initiatives. And my third recommendation would be read the recommendations of the report and follow them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena. So this marks the end of the second part of our today's event. We've got the presentation from Professor Simon Borg. We also have listened to the responses from the universities, and now we are coming to the questions and answers sessions. Would you like to have 5-7 minutes break? Yeah? So then, let's have 10 minutes break and come back at 1 exactly for questions. You know that the facilities are just right near the lift. Coffee and tea and refreshments are also there on the terrace. And we are streaming, so we have a lot of questions from online visitors, and we will have very nice Hour with Simon Borg after our break. 1 o'clock.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to come back. We are ready to continue.
Шановні пані та панове, повертайтеся на місця, ми готові продовжити.
Я щось, вибачте. Зараз можна їсти поставити?
Ви готові? Ви повернулися? Готові продовжувати? Так. Відпочили трошки під час перерви? Гаразд. Зараз ми переходимо до питань і відповідей. Дозвольте мені пояснити процедуру. Ви знаєте, що у нас відбувається трансляція нашої події, і назбиралося багато питань від тих, хто дивиться нас онлайн. Є представники різних університетів, національних університетів, є коментарі від деяких колег з Європи. Отже, як ми будемо працювати? Ми відповімо на кілька питань, які були поставлені онлайн, і візьмемо кілька питань від аудиторії. І я впевнена, що у вас є питання. Саймон Вільямс буде зачитувати.
Shall we start with online? From the question from the students.
Jana, thank you. Yes, we thought it's good for us to remember who all of this is about, who are the most important people in this project, in this conversation, and that's the students. So, Simon, we have a question for you from first-year students at Dnipro Polytechnic, who ask, as students at one of the universities that took part in the project, what are your impressions of ESP teaching in the classes you visited?
Okay, thank you. That's a good one to start with. Thank you to the student for sending this. Maybe they're still watching, so we can say hi to them. One thing to say is that in my presentation this morning, I was, of course, quite selective in what I focused on. And if you get around to reading the full report, you'll see there's a lot more detail about the different parts of the study. So one part of the study did ask students for their opinions about their ESP classes. And as we said, about 2,200 replied. Now, it's important to put those numbers in context. There are about 55,000 students doing ESP in the 15 universities who took part in the evaluation. 55,000, and about 2,200 completed the questionnaire. So we're looking at about 4 or 5% of students who currently do ESP who answered the questionnaire. So even though they're extremely positive in their responses, nowhere in the report, of course, do I say this is true for all ESP students in the country. Okay, we have 5% saying that, and this is always a challenge in projects of this kind in terms of getting representative samples. But with questionnaires, we always rely on the people who agree to respond. So we're not trying to disguise the fact that there will be ESP classes, there will be ESP lessons around the country where not much has changed. Maybe where teachers are still using detailed reading, retelling, translation, grammar teaching. I have no doubt that there's still quite a lot of that happening. So the conclusions of the report are not that has stopped happening everywhere. The report is saying that compared to before the project, the situation now has changed significantly. Okay? But that does not mean that nowhere is there translation, etc., still being used. So the question from the student here is a relevant one because maybe they heard me talk about positive changes and perhaps their experience is, oh, hold on, I just had an ESP class this morning and that's not what we did. And that may very well still be the case. Okay? But we can report on what we saw. And of course, I'm also aware that when I visit lessons, of course, everyone makes perhaps an extra effort to be well prepared, etc. So we take that into account as well. So we're not saying that everywhere in the country all ESP teaching is all of a sudden interactive, etc. But that compared to 3 years ago, there's no doubt that the situation in the classrooms of trained teachers has substantially changed. So, I mean, in answering this question, all I can say is that my observations support what HODs, teachers and students have said, that teaching has changed a lot, it's more interactive, etc. That is what my observations suggest, but I'm also reminding everyone that we have a snapshot of a certain proportion of respondents. And of course, there will be universities who didn't participate in the project at all, for example, where nothing much may have changed there. So how do we reach those universities so that they too can engage in this process of reform?
Thank you very much, Simon. Now the question from Lviv.
National University. I represent the biggest university in Ukraine, biggest technical, not only technical, but the biggest university. Our university consists of 16 institutions, and so we have a lot of educational program in English. So we also are going to start another new program in English in the different levels, in bachelor, master degree, in PhD degree. So what would you recommend to better coordinate this process? Because we have no some organizational structure to coordinate this project, the quality in teaching and learning. So how we can organize better this process? Can we emphasize this on decentralization, or rather we must centralize this process? Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. That's a good question, which relates quite clearly to one of the recommendations I highlighted earlier, that there is a need within institutions for mechanisms to coordinate EMI activity. And I think in the current climate, where universities are being encouraged to have more autonomy, there's no reason why there should only be one model or one approach to this. Clearly, the basic idea should be that there is some kind of coordination. There are people, or there is an office or a department in an institution which is the authoritative reference point for questions, information, decision, and possibly quality assurance as well, related to EMI. I think that's the general idea. In extremely large institutions, you know, maybe saying having one person doesn't work because there's too much happening. We heard earlier about the university where they have 130 courses in English. That sounds like a lot of EMI activity to me. So maybe having one person isn't going to work, but you maybe have a central person, then you have representatives within the faculties. But the idea is, at the moment, there is no coordination, is there? There are, even within the same university, departments are doing very different things in very different ways and interpreting regulations in varying ways as well. And it's that's what we need to think about, without trying to impose a very centralized model on everyone. So I like to talk about managed autonomy. I like to talk about managed autonomy, which is a system where there are some general frameworks, there are some general parameters, there are some general requirements, but within that, there is autonomy, there is flexibility and freedom for people to develop their own approaches, as long as they respect the overall framework. So the overall framework is one of coordination, is one of consistency, is one of minimum standards. So we talked about, okay, if I'm a lecturer and I want to teach EMI, what prerequisites do I need to meet? I think it's an important parameter to define. Is it just I have my B2 or my B1, or are there some pedagogical requirements as well? Or for students, if students are going to attend an EMI course, Ukrainian students, what are the requirements in terms of language for them? If there are no requirements, unfortunately we do end up in the kind of difficult situations I saw, where students are sitting there, the lecturer is doing a perfectly good job in terms of delivery, but it doesn't really mean anything to the students, and they shouldn't really have been experiencing that in English. Okay, so I mean it's a broad answer to a broad question in a sense, but the issue is, how do we? Universities do need a central point of reference or central points of reference which can provide consistent guidance to departments, to staff, about how to develop EMI in a way that ensures quality. And as I said earlier, quality isn't simply about volume. I know you all want to talk about how many EMI courses you have, and the increase in volume is certainly an indicator. But an increase in volume doesn't automatically correlate with an increase in quality. So it's important that we have both. We have increases in quality matched or perhaps moderated by attention to quality. And if we need to slow down the volume to increase the quality, that's desirable, I think, as well.
And thank you very much, Simon. That was the question from the Vice Rector of Lviv Polytechnic, and I would like to ask you to introduce yourself, okay? Simon, your question?
Well, I'm going to read out the next online question, which actually leads on very well from Simon's last comment. And you've talked about the importance of quality assurance of ESP and EMI. And so the question is, how can that quality assurance be provided? What hints and tips and suggestions do you have for institutions and how they can do that?
Yeah, very, very important issue, not just for EMI, but for higher education, for education generally, isn't it? So quality assurance, I think, must start with some sense of standards or criteria. It's hard to talk about quality assurance if we haven't defined what quality looks like. So I think one job for institutions is to say, what does good quality EMI look like? What are the criteria for judging good quality EMI? I'm not aware, or at least I haven't seen during my visits, any official statement of criteria of those kind. Maybe they exist and I didn't see them, but in my discussions with various lecturers, the impression I got that there isn't any clear sense of what the criteria are. And I think that's the starting point. That's the starting point, having informed discussions and reaching sensible conclusions about what quality looks like. And that might, of course, refer to the quality of the lecturer, in terms of English, in terms of instructional skills. It could be to do with the quality of the course design. It will be to do with the quality of students, their work, their skills, what they're able to produce. It could be quality of assessment. So there are various elements of course design and delivery which need to be considered, and then criteria for each or parameters for each defined. So I think that's the starting point. Without those, you can't evaluate something unless you know what the criteria for evaluation are. Once those are in place, then in terms of mechanisms, what we need, I think, are a combination of more centralized and more, I guess, staff-driven measures. So if we talk about what happens in the UK very often with quality assurance, there are external measures, and those people coming in from outside the department with the criteria. But there's a lot of the work that takes place is done internally. Staff have to do self-assessments. Staff get evaluated by students. Peer assessment of staff. Okay, so it's not just an external activity. A lot of the quality assurance takes place through internal measures as well. And so a certain amount of trust is given to staff themselves to evaluate their work. And again, I think in broad terms, that is a model that seems to work quite well, this combination of more objective external measures and more internal measures where staff are evaluating their own work. So criteria, I think, is the starting point. What are the criteria? And then what are the processes? And as I said, a combination of external and internal measures seems to be a common model.
Thank you very much, Simon. Question from the floor? Please, Yulia Sobol, the head of Foreign Languages Department, Zaporizhia.
That's why I want to thank British Council and Jana, because you made very huge, inspiring work, and due to this project, the way we teach ESP, EAP, and EMI in our university changed dramatically, and it forged the community of very devoted, like-minded people all over Ukraine that are sharing their experiences, knowledge, ideas, updates on the webinars, students, conferences, and so on. And of course, we've got a huge incentive to promote, to develop and to improve our skills, but the project is over, and there will be no schools, no meetings of head of departments, mandatory dissemination events, then achievement reports, which were quite important for us and stimulated us. That's why, as to the maintaining the momentum that we've got, maybe you'll give us some advice how not to slow down, how not to stop, because we are eager to develop further. And this is first question. And if it is possible, I'll ask the other question as well, the next one. It is, what is the best way to help EMI students and teachers at the university? Whether it is possible for them to use both languages, native and English, in studies, or just stick to English exceptionally. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the momentum issue, perhaps momentum is one word you're taking away with you today, and it's a good word to take away, because it really is a strong feature of the project, which I felt very, very clearly in my travels. So how do we keep the momentum going? Of course, you know, once it's a challenge for any project, the sustainability. Once you take away the external pressure to do action plans and submit progress reports and to attend compulsory meetings, once you take that away, of course, there is always a danger that certain activities no longer continue. But I guess this is the challenge for all of you. Very often you have to force people to do something in order for them to recognize the value of the activity. So, okay, you've been maybe compelled a little bit to do your action plans. Now, if you recognize the value of those action plans, or maybe not necessarily such a cumbersome document, but if you see now the value of documenting your plans in that way, that is something you can continue doing, because if you see the value of it, you should be able to continue doing it without external pressure. Okay? Not necessarily in the same elaborate way. I know the action plans were quite elaborate, quite formal, but the basic idea is, what are our plans for the next 6 months, 12 months? Let's write these down. Let's talk about them. Let's agree on these at departmental level. Let's write down what we're going to do to address those plans. So it doesn't have to be something as formal as what you were previously doing, but I think the basic idea remains the same. But it all will boil down now to you having recognized the value of the activities you were sort of pushed to do. Heads of department meetings were one of the most valuable things in the project, I think, because you were able to get together, share ideas, share expertise. Okay, the British Council isn't going to send you an email anymore saying, okay, we're having a meeting. How are you going to keep those meetings going? And I think I said somewhere in the report, in the full report, is it possible that you take it in turns, once or twice a year, to host a meeting for other heads of department? You draw up a roster, an order, saying, hey, here's our plan for the next 2-3 years. These are the departments that are taking responsibility. They will host the meeting. Is that not feasible? Doesn't seem to be too difficult to achieve for me. And you'll be achieving the same goals as you were when the British Council were achieving. So I think there are things you can be doing to sustain this momentum. There's, of course, momentum internally. You've got your teachers are excited about what's been happening. How do you maintain that excitement? Well, the professional development we've talked about now needs to be more in-house. And maybe we can provide you with some support on the various options there. but that will be a vital part of keeping the momentum going. So teachers feel that they are still engaged in professional development. Not all of a sudden everything is stopped, because of course they would be disappointed. So I'm quite confident that you'll be able to do this, okay? Maybe with some external support and advice, but largely internally. I think that's possible. Should I attempt an answer to the second question as well? So the second question is a very, very broad one, isn't it? What's the best way? You know, and I normally answer the question by saying there is no best way for anything, but what's a good way, or what can we do to support EMI teachers, lecturers and students? And again, in the report and in the presentation this morning, I briefly alluded to certain things. So EMI lecturers tell me they need more support because developing EMI courses takes time. So this is up to institutions to provide this support. It's not something the British Council can do or I can do. This is institutions, if they're serious about supporting EMI, need to find ways of recognizing the additional workload involved. We can support staff by ensuring they have access to professional development, which allows them to become more effective EMI lecturers. And this will consist of either language development, but also pedagogical development. So again, the external courses provided in the project may not be available, but what can institutions do now? What can institutions use the expertise of their trained lecturers, because institutions have trained lecturers? Can these trained lecturers now become EMI trainers for their institutions? So how do we use the people who are already trained to support others? How do we support EMI students? Well, what are the challenges that EMI students face? A key challenge seems to be language. So how can we support them? Well, the obvious answer is make sure they get more English during their university courses. It's an obvious solution, but of course a challenging solution. Do EMI classes have to be 100% English? Or is there scope for what some lecturers describe to me as a binary approach, where within the same lecture, they're working with English and Ukrainian? I don't see any problem with that. If that works better, if working 100% in English isn't feasible, then don't insist on it until people are ready. There's no problem at all with working sort of, bilingually in an informed way. So I think there are various strategies that we can take to support. But a lot of these will need to come now internally from institutions. If institutions are serious about EMI, they'll need to provide the support. If they don't, then unfortunately things won't develop much. Yeah.
Thank you. Final question from online. It's come from far away. It's Jill Fortune in the University of Columbia. So hello, Jill, if you're still watching us. And Jill's question is, I was wondering if the results from the student perspective were compared with equivalent ones from pre-training, i.e. from the baseline.
I'm just thinking about the time difference in Colombia. Aren't they like 7 or 8 hours ahead?
You must be up very, very early.
Ahead of us. It's either up very early or very late. So well done, Jill, on that. Yeah, so I mentioned the baseline. I don't think we were able to make direct comparisons between the baseline and the evaluation, because the baseline was really trying to identify what some of the challenges were. It was broader. We didn't have the same students, for example, to go back to at the end of the project. So I think there would have been several problems in trying to make direct comparisons between the baseline and the project evaluation, which is why we didn't even attempt that. What we tried to do to make the results of the evaluation as trustworthy as possible is to make sure we did the evaluation rigorously. So for example, when we engaged students in doing surveys, we made sure these were students taught by trained ESP teachers. Because if they had been taught by untrained teachers, then their results wouldn't be as meaningful. So we did take certain steps to maximize the credibility of the results. and to ensure as far as possible that we can be confident that they reflect the achievements of the project. But it wouldn't have been feasible to try and make direct comparisons between the evaluation and the baseline. Okay. So.
One more question from the floor.
Okay. Елена Король, Kyiv National Economic University. Making educational reform work on your blog. You've mentioned some key, you've given very nice short summary of this project, and you've mentioned key facilitative factors that allow practical changes in professional development. And you've mentioned collective enterprise, teacher motivation, and institutional support, and you have to give clarification as committed leadership. It seems to me that it is very interesting, and how we should apply it to ourselves. It seems to me that it is very important.
Thank you, yes, thank you. So the reference is to a blog I wrote recently about the project. And what I talked about, I didn't talk about the results of the project like I did today, but I talked about the factors that allowed the project to be successful. And I think this project is a good example of the kinds of conditions that allow projects to work, projects generally. Because we had motivated teachers, we had a strong sense of collective enterprise, this idea of community that we've talked about a lot today. And one of the things I mentioned, which our colleague is asking about, is committed leadership. And I think that's also a very important factor in any project, never mind a project of this scale. So what do we mean by committed leadership? Well, we mean that the people who are senior leaders, and it's quite clear they don't know much about the project. Whereas I think it does make a huge difference when leaders at different levels are centrally engaged. It gives them a much better understanding. So for example, in this project, I always use the heads of department of the foreign language department as the best example of that, because they were critical people in the project who were centrally involved all the way through. And that undoubtedly made a huge difference. Perhaps one reason why there's maybe, if we had to compare, greater impact on ESP than on EMI, is because for EMI there isn't an equivalent at the moment coordinator. If we had those people, we had those committed leaders there, undoubtedly there would have been more impact there. So the questions for us are, who are the influential leaders in relation to any project? How do we engage them in the project? How do we engage them? It's not just about sending them information. They need to be engaged more effectively. For example, the heads of department here attended regular meetings. They attended some of the training. They felt part of the project, not just recipients. They were also involved in decisions when the syllabus was being designed as well. So they had some sense of ownership there. So I think, what can we do to identify the key people, to get them on board, to get them involved, to give them a sense of ownership, to give them a sense of satisfaction as well, so when the project succeeds, they feel that it's partly their success as well. All of these things. The more we can do there with leaders, the more support we're going to get for the project, and the more successful the project will be. Yeah.
I think maybe we just got time for one more question, because I saw you had your hand up. If it's a quick one.
National Technical University. Yeah, thank you. Again, Johanna and Dean of Faculty of Humanities. We really appreciate your recommendations. But I have a question concerning, how do you think, what is the strongest point of ESP teaching at Ukrainian universities, to your mind?
Okay. So what is the strongest point? One strongest point?
The strongest, yeah.
Again, my answers are based on the experience I've had on the project, okay? So I've visited 8 universities, I've seen teaching in those 8 universities and spoken to people there, okay? One thing that really struck me is the motivation of staff to change. Okay, the motivation of staff to change. And again, in my blog, I mention this as a critical factor in educational reform. Because you can send people on training courses, you can give them new knowledge. But unless people have the motivation to use that knowledge, things don't change. Okay, so training itself does not guarantee change. You need knowledge, needs to be enhanced, skills need to be improved, but that needs to be supported by motivation to change. And what I saw across the departments I visited was a high level of motivation to engage in the project, to accept that things could be better. Yeah? So quite open-minded attitudes towards change. And I think that's really been critical. Without that, we would have still had the training, but perhaps teachers would have gone back and nothing would have changed. The same applies to the heads of department, of course, who were also similarly motivated to change, and that's why they supported the project. So I think if I had to say one thing, I'd say the motivation of everyone involved to change was really critical. And I felt that when I visited the departments.
Thank you very much. Any questions from online, Simon? No? One last question from...
I think we've got time for one easy one.
One easy one.
Two easy ones, maybe.
Olga Lazareva from National Technical University, Kharkiv Polytechnic Institute. Unfortunately, you didn't visit our university. It's a pity, but still. Okay.
Is it on?
As you know, more and more universities provide education in English for foreign students. My question is, have you visited EMI or other classes given in English to foreign students? And if yes, then is there any difference between teaching and students' perception of the classes for Ukrainian students and foreign students? Thank you.
Good. Thank you for that one. Yes. I did see some EMI classes taught to entire groups of foreign students. I think most of the EMI I saw was Ukrainian, but I understand that in many universities there is a lot of EMI for foreign students. And I think at least one university we visit, they have a whole faculty, I think a whole medical faculty just for foreign students. I don't know how typical that is. So I did see yes is the answer to the first part of the question. Are there any differences between EMI for foreign students and EMI for local students? Well, in principle, no, but in practice, of course, yes. If I'm a lecturer, I'm a Ukrainian lecturer teaching students from Nigeria or India, I can't really fall back on a common shared language. So there's more pressure on the lecturer to communicate effectively entirely in English. So that's one big difference. Another challenge may be that sometimes the levels of English that these foreign students have are quite high. So students from Nigeria, for example, English is widely spoken in Nigeria. It's an official language, I believe. So they will come with quite high levels. And that, again, may be an additional source of challenge for the lecturer, this feeling that maybe my students know more English than me. So I don't think there's anything you can do about that. That's part of the training for the lecturer, to allow them to use that productively. To use that productively. So how can you use students' superior knowledge of English to contribute to the lecture, to enhance the lecture? There are ways of doing that. So rather than seeing it as a cause of concern, you see it as another resource that you can exploit positively. When we're doing EMI to Ukrainian students, of course, there is always the option, where necessary, of using the shared local language. And as I said earlier, I see no problem at all with using that as a resource, using it in a principled way. And that maybe gives the lecturer a bit more support, you know, gives them, okay, if we can't manage in English this point, we can always go back and explain again. So I think that's good. The danger, of course, is that the EMI class becomes more and more taught in the local language, which then defeats the purpose of EMI. So again, it's about doing that in a principled way. So there clearly are differences, but in terms of, you know, pedagogical techniques that make lecturing effective, there's no difference. You know, if we're talking about we want lecturers to be clearly structured, if we want lecturers to be asking questions, to involving the students, this applies whether they're foreign students, whether they're local students. Earlier, I wanted to say something about asking questions, which I didn't have time to say, but as I said, I noticed that in a lot of the EMI classes, lecturers were asking questions, you know, which is something that was encouraged during the training. Involve the students by asking them questions. But when you look at the detailed recommendations for EMI, you'll see that one of my points is that lecturers very often asked either too many questions, so it's about going to the other extreme, is it? From I never ask questions, now I'm going to ask questions all the time. They ask too many questions without giving students a chance to respond. And if you're asking questions in English, unless you've planned the wording of the questions carefully, very often the question will not be easy for the students to understand. So I think if you are teaching EMI and you're planning your lecture, one thing that lecturers need to do is say, when am I going to ask questions? What questions am I going to ask? And what is the wording of the question? Because very often on the spot, you know, if you're doing it in a foreign language, the question might not come out well. Even experienced English, you know, teachers of English, even ESP teachers, it's good for them to plan what questions they're going to ask, because we want the questions to be asked at the right time and in the right way. So we want to avoid these enormous swings, you know, from this is the way lectures used to be, just talk, no questions, to we'll ask questions all the time in a way that isn't supporting learning either. It's about finding that balance. Of course, probably asking too many questions is better than asking none at all. But you know, as we continue to develop, that's one of the pedagogical points that I've made a note of in the report. Okay, yeah. Have we got time for one more?
Thank you very much, Simon. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, and we will have a chance to communicate informally. And this is the time to close our day. And for the final closing words, I would like to invite our director, Simon Williams.
Thank you. Well, actually, I lied. Jana, you said, is there one more question? And I said, no, there was. There was one question, but it was at the British Council. So I'm going to read it out and answer it, which is the British Council planning any other projects connected with English in Ukraine? I imagine all of you, actually, would have answered that question. And the answer is yes, of course. We heard today, earlier today, from the Minister, Lydia Mihailovna, a very clear invitation to join with the Ministry and their working group to develop a new government policy on English in universities, which is fantastic news, is a fantastic result to come out of this project and out of other policy imperatives. So we will be absolutely responding to that gracious invitation and working with the Ministry. We will need to work with a lot of you to get your advice and your ideas so we can feed that in. We also continue to work at school level with English as well. Last year we trained more than 100 change agents, and some of you in the room I know, who then went on to train 17,000 Year 1 teachers of English to help deliver the new standards under the new Ukrainian school initiative. We were working with our French and our German counterparts on that. And we're continuing to work with the Ministry again this year as those teachers now need to sort of work at Year 3 and Year 4 of the new standards as the pupils go up the ladder in the new school. But we also know, as you know, that English teachers are great ways of getting other things into schools, other things into the curriculum. So we're working at school level also to introduce core skills, 21st century skills, things like creative thinking, problem solving, team working, entrepreneurial thinking, that can be woven into other subjects. Woven into English, but also woven into other subjects to make the education that children get more effective. And we're also hoping to work with some schools in the east of Ukraine, where we know that teachers and schools are some of the few remaining trusted, stable organizations and individuals for communities affected most closely by the conflict, and where we can work with those schools, work with those teachers to help young people and their communities become more resilient, become more cohesive, and English teachers will be absolutely a part of that. There will be other stuff as well. We haven't planned it all, but that's some of the main ideas. So yes, absolutely, British Council will be doing more work in English. I'd like really now just to close today's session by saying a few thank yous. A great thank you to the Ministry of Education and our partners and friends in the ministry who have worked with us on this project. A massive thanks to all of you, our partner universities, 32 of you. It was a competition. We had many more than 32 applications. Some of you applied the first round, didn't quite get in. You applied the second round, you did get in. We know how keen you were to take part in the project. And you have made the project the success that it is. I said at the start, I jokingly referred to this as the Three Simons project. In fact, of course, it's really the Jana project. And I would particularly like to thank Jana and her team for leading this project. Simon, you talked about gentle pressure, external pressure. That's not how I would describe Jana, but I know that's the very constructive and positive and vital role that she's played within the program. So Jana, thank you to you. And you can be sure that whatever else we do, working with universities in English, Jana will be continuing to provide that gentle pressure in her gracious way. I suppose our biggest thanks also are to the students for whom this is all about, and for whom we are all committed to give them the English they need, to give them the skills they need, to give them the life they need, to give them the outlook they need to create the Ukraine that we all need and that we all want. And I will go back to my starting point, which is 5 years since those momentous days in Maidan. This is one project that we believe helps contribute to making that Ukraine. We're very proud to be part of it. We're very proud to be working with all of you. And we've come to the end of one phase of it, but we are now at the start of another phase. So thank you all very much for coming today, and we look forward to working with you again.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Professor Simon Borg, for your hard work. Yes, English for Universities project finishes, and we all feel a bit of this sadness. But this is not the end. As Simon said, this is the start, this is new journey in future. But that's it for today's event, and I invite you for informal communication, networking. We have a lot of food for thought. And now let's have some food for body. I steal this phrase from Simon Williams. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have stolen this phrase from you.
Everyone knows there's lunch, yeah?
Yes,
People
we
know
need
there is lunch.
some joint photo.
Of course.
Well,